My husband told me to apologize to his toxic sister in front of 14 people or get out of his house. And when I refused, they called me crazy, paranoid, and desperate for attention. What they did not know was that I had already spent 14 months quietly tracking hidden money transfers, suspicious approvals, and millions moving through their fake consulting company. 8 months later, federal investigators were walking through their front door at 6:12 in the morning with financial crime warrants, and the same family who mocked me at dinner was suddenly fighting to stay out of prison. Tonight, with me, let me tell you how their revenge against me turned into the biggest mistake of their lives. Chapter 1. My husband told me to apologize to his sister in front of 14 people or get out of his house. Nobody at the table looked surprised when he said it. That was the part I remember most clearly. Not the words themselves, not the way his hand hit the table hard enough to shake the wine glasses, but the silence that followed. 14 people sat around that long white dining table in Harold and Diane Holloway's house in Granite Bay, and every single one of them acted like I was the problem waiting to happen. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, staring at the candlelight reflecting against my water glass, while my chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. Outside the windows, the pool lights glowed blue across the backyard. Inside, everything smelled like rosemary, red wine, and perfume. It should have felt warm. It felt like a courtroom. My name is Claire Holloway. I was 39 years old, and for the last 8 years, I had been married to Nolan Holloway, a commercial real estate executive who knew exactly how to charm investors, calm angry clients, and make everyone in a room believe he was reasonable. I used to think that made him safe. It took me years to realize there is a difference between a calm man and a passive man. I worked as a senior compliance analyst for a financial risk firm in Sacramento. My job was catching irregularities before they became disasters. I reviewed transaction histories, flagged suspicious activity, and spent most of my life paying attention to details other people ignored. At work, people respected that about me. Inside the Holloway family, it made everyone uncomfortable. Vanessa Mercer arrived 20 minutes late to dinner, wearing a fitted cream dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floors, while Diane rushed to hug her like the evening could not officially begin until she walked through the door. Vanessa smiled at everyone the way wealthy people sometimes do when they already assume the room belongs to them. Her husband Ethan came in behind her, carrying a bottle of wine and looking exhausted. "Sorry we are late," Vanessa said while sliding into her chair across from me. "The club was impossible tonight." Nolan smiled at her immediately. Harold laughed. Diane touched Vanessa's arm. The energy of the room shifted toward her without anyone even noticing it happen. I noticed. I always noticed. Dinner started normally. Conversations drifted around the table about property taxes, golf memberships, rising insurance rates, and a couple Harold knew who moved to Scottsdale after retiring. I stayed quiet, cutting my chicken into careful pieces while Vanessa talked loudly about a luxury resort outside Napa Valley. Then she looked directly at me. "Claire, are you still doing that compliance thing?" There it was, that compliance thing. I nodded once. "Same firm." Vanessa smiled while lifting her wine glass. "I could never do a job like that. Looking at spreadsheets all day would kill me. I guess some people are built for safe little lives." A few people around the table laughed. Not because it was funny, because Vanessa expected them to. I felt Nolan's knee press lightly against mine under the table. A warning: stay quiet, keep the evening easy. That small gesture made something twist in my stomach, because it was familiar. Over the years, Nolan had developed an entire silent language for controlling uncomfortable situations. A touch against my leg meant stop talking. A sigh meant I was overreacting. A tight jaw meant I was embarrassing him. Eventually, I started correcting myself before he even had to. I rehearsed conversations in my head before family dinners. I measured every sentence before speaking. I learned how to laugh half a second after everyone else, so nobody would accuse me of being cold or difficult. I slowly became smaller inside my own marriage. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other. Honestly, Claire, do you ever wonder if Nolan's settled? The room went silent. Ethan lowered his fork, Diane stared down at her plate, Harold found his drink fascinating. Nobody defended me. Nobody even looked uncomfortable enough. I turned toward Nolan because some part of me still believed he would finally say something. Anything. Instead, he reached for his wine glass without lifting his eyes. And right there, surrounded by 14 people pretending not to notice my humiliation, I realized something that changed me forever. Vanessa enjoyed hurting me, but Nolan allowed it. That was even worse. Chapter 2. Something shifted in the room after that. Not loudly. Nobody raised their voice right away. Nobody threw a glass or stormed out. It was quieter than that. Meaner than that. Vanessa smiled at me from across the table while slowly turning her wine glass between her fingers, completely relaxed now that Nolan was not going to defend me. The tension in my chest spread downward until even my stomach hurt. "You know," she said, "I have always admired women who are content with simpler lives." A few people shifted awkwardly in their seats. Diane forced out a nervous laugh. "Vanessa." "What?" she said lightly. "I am complimenting her." "No, you are not," Ethan muttered under his breath. Vanessa ignored him. I kept my eyes on my plate because I already knew how these dinners worked. If I reacted too fast, I would look emotional. If I stayed too quiet, Vanessa would keep pushing until everyone felt uncomfortable enough to blame me for ruining the mood. That was the Holloway family pattern. Vanessa lit the fire. Everyone else waited to see if I would burn quietly. Nolan picked up his wine glass. "Claire, just let it go." There it was. Not "stop, Vanessa," not "enough," just "let it go." Like my humiliation was another spilled drink someone expected me to wipe up. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "Nolan works with developers, investors, city council people. Those rooms are competitive. They require a certain energy." I looked at her. "What exactly are you saying?" Her smile widened. "I think you know." Trevor suddenly became very interested in cutting his steak. Ava reached for her water without looking at anybody. Harold stared at the center of the table like maybe this would all disappear if nobody acknowledged it directly. Vanessa kept going anyway. "Some women help their husbands grow socially. They know how to host people, build connections, make conversations interesting. I just think Nolan deserves someone who fits naturally into that world." I felt heat crawl into my face. I spent years learning how to survive rooms exactly like that one. Wealthy families, country club conversations, investor dinners where people smiled while quietly measuring each other's value. I never truly belonged there, and Vanessa knew that. That was why she enjoyed these moments so much. Nolan finally sighed. "Vanessa, enough." But even then, he sounded irritated, not protective. She tilted her head. "I am only trying to help her understand why people respond to her the way they do." Something cold moved through me at that sentence. Because she believed it. Vanessa genuinely believed she was superior to me, more polished, more valuable, more useful in Nolan's world. And somewhere along the line, part of me had started believing it too. I used to rehearse conversations before family events. I would stand in front of the bathroom mirror trying to predict what Vanessa might say so I could answer calmly enough not to upset anyone. Sometimes I apologized before arguments even started because I knew Nolan hated tension more than unfairness. Once, after Vanessa criticized the dress I wore to one of Nolan's donor events, I apologized to her in the kitchen while she checked her makeup in her phone camera. Not because I thought I was wrong, because I wanted the evening to stop hurting. That memory flashed through my head while Vanessa sat across from me, smiling like she had already won something. I set my fork down carefully. I am not sure why you are talking about me like I'm not sitting here, I said. The entire table went still again. Nolan's knee pressed hard against mine under the table, a warning. Vanessa laughed softly. See, this is exactly what I mean. You always make things heavier than they need to be. My throat tightened. Heavier, like I was the problem for noticing humiliation while it was happening directly in front of me. Ethan cleared his throat. Maybe we should talk about something else. Vanessa waved him off. Ethan, please. Then she looked at Nolan. Tell me honestly, have you ever wished Claire cared more about helping your career socially? Nolan froze. That was the first moment all night I saw genuine panic cross his face, because Vanessa had dragged him into the middle of it publicly. Usually, he hid behind silence. Usually, he let Vanessa speak for him while pretending not to notice the damage. Now, everyone at the table was staring at him. Diane whispered, Vanessa, enough already. But she kept going. I mean, she's smart, obviously. Nobody's denying that. But there's a difference between being intelligent and having presence. My hands started trembling beneath the tablecloth. I curled them into fists so nobody would notice. Nolan took a slow breath. Claire, don't turn this into something bigger than it is. That sentence hit me harder than Vanessa's insults ever did, because he still thought I was the problem, not his sister humiliating me in front of 14 people, not the family pretending not to see it, me. I looked at him carefully. You really think I'm the one making this uncomfortable? His jaw tightened immediately. Lower your voice. I hadn't even raised it. Vanessa gave me a pitying smile that made me want to throw my water glass across the room. Claire, nobody is attacking you. You always take things so personally. I stared at her, then at Nolan, then around the table at the people who had watched this happen for years, while pretending they were good people because they stayed quiet. Something inside me started changing right there. Not exploding, hardening. Vanessa picked up her wine again. Honestly, I think you owe everyone an apology for your attitude tonight. I blinked at her. My attitude? I spent the entire dinner swallowing humiliation bite after bite while she carved pieces out of me for sport, and somehow I was still the person expected to smooth everything over? Nolan turned towards me fully now. Claire, you're making everyone uncomfortable. There it was again, the familiar shame, the familiar pressure to shrink myself so the room could breathe easier. Only this time, it didn't work. Diane reached for my arm. Honey, please, let's just enjoy the evening. Enjoy. The word almost made me laugh. Vanessa folded her arms and leaned back in her chair, waiting. Nolan's face darkened when I stayed silent. Then suddenly he slammed his palm against the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. Apologize to my sister right now or leave my house. Nobody moved. I could actually hear my own heartbeat. My house. Not our house. Not the home I helped pay for. Not the mortgage documents I organized every year his mother hosted. His house. I looked around the table one last time, waiting for somebody to say this had gone too far. Nobody did. That's when I realized they didn't want peace nearly as much as they wanted obedience. Slowly, I pushed my chair back and stood up while every pair of eyes in the room followed me. Vanessa's smile faded the second I stayed standing. Not completely, just enough for me to notice the uncertainty underneath it. Nolan looked furious, but there was something else in his face too. Panic. Small, controlled, almost invisible panic. The kind people like Nolan spent their entire lives trying to hide. Claire, sit down. My hands were shaking under the table, so I clasped them together tightly before anyone could see it. No. Nobody moved. The dining room suddenly felt too warm. I could smell butter, wine, and the faint chlorine drifting in through the open patio doors. Somewhere outside, water splashed softly into the pool. Vanessa gave a short laugh. Oh my God, are you seriously turning this into a scene? A scene. That word almost made me smile, because 14 months earlier, before any of this exploded publicly, I had already started noticing something was wrong. It happened on a Thursday afternoon while rain hammered against the kitchen windows of our house in Granite Bay. Nolan was upstairs on a conference call with developers from Newport Beach, and I was sitting at the kitchen island reviewing refinance paperwork for our mortgage renewal. Financial paperwork usually fell on me because Nolan hated details. Tax returns, insurance renewals, investment summaries, banking records, I handled all of it. I remember sitting there barefoot in leggings and an old college sweatshirt, flipping through transaction reports while reheating coffee I had already forgotten to drink twice. At first, the transfer looked ordinary. $25,000 sent from our joint account to Mercer Strategic Consulting, LLC. I frowned at the screen for a second but kept scrolling. Vanessa called herself a consultant sometimes. Wealthy families moved money around constantly. It was probably business related. At least that's what I told myself. Then I found another transfer. Then another. The amounts changed, but the pattern did not. Every few months, large payments quietly disappeared into Vanessa's LLC under vague descriptions that sounded intentionally forgettable: strategic development, brand expansion, investor support. Nothing specific, nothing clean. I sat there staring at the screen while a strange pressure built in my chest. Something about it felt wrong. Not dramatic wrong, careful wrong. That scared me more. When Nolan finally came downstairs later that evening, I asked about it casually while he fixed himself a bourbon. What exactly does Vanessa consult on? He barely looked up. Networking stuff. What kind of networking stuff? He shrugged too fast. Claire, I do not know. Investor relations, branding. Why? I watched him pour the drink. Nolan always looked relaxed when he lied. That was part of what made him good at business. Just curious, I said. He nodded once, but his shoulders stayed tight the rest of the night. I noticed that, too. After that, I tried to let it go. I honestly did. I told myself families helped each other financially all the time. I told myself Vanessa probably intended to pay us back. I told myself I was reading too much into harmless transactions because my job trained me to look for problems. But once you notice a crack in something, your brain keeps returning to it. A week later, Vanessa posted photos from a luxury resort in Napa Valley: white robes, private wine tastings, spa suites overlooking vineyards. She captioned one photo with the words, "Hard work pays off." 3 days later, another transfer appeared. I still remember the feeling that hit me then. Not anger, fear, because suddenly I didn't think I was imagining things anymore. Over the next few months, I started quietly keeping records: screenshots, bank statements, transaction dates, approval histories. I created folders Nolan didn't know existed, not because I wanted revenge, because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy. One night, after Nolan fell asleep beside me, I sat in the dark with my laptop balanced on my knees, comparing electronic approvals attached to several transfers. That's when my stomach dropped. My name appeared on authorizations I didn't remember approving. I clicked through timestamps twice. One approval had been processed while I was in a 6-hour compliance training seminar downtown. Another happened during a flight home from Seattle when my phone had been completely disconnected. I stared at the screen so long my eyes started burning. Maybe there was an explanation, I thought. Maybe Nolan clicked the wrong profile. Maybe the banking software glitched. Maybe I wanted to believe my husband would never do something like that badly enough to invent excuses for him. The next morning, I could barely look at him across the breakfast table. Meanwhile, Vanessa's lifestyle kept becoming more excessive, more curated, more performative. She suddenly joined an exclusive country club in Sacramento, started posting expensive tasting menus online, talked constantly about investor retreats, private memberships, luxury wellness weekends. People with stable money usually didn't work that hard to advertise it. Ethan started noticing things too. At a family barbecue that summer, Ethan asked Vanessa how much the backyard renovation ended up costing. She laughed too quickly. Less than we expected. Ethan frowned. That's strange. The contractor told me it went way over budget. Vanessa immediately changed the subject. I looked at Nolan across the patio. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I realized something worse than the money itself. Nolan wasn't accidentally helping Vanessa. He was protecting her image, the image she built around herself, while using marital funds he never even discussed with me. Our money. The mortgage payments I helped manage, the savings account connected to our future, the accounts tied to both our names. And all of that was happening behind closed doors. Vanessa still sat across from me at family dinners, treating me like I was the least valuable person in the room. Back in Harold and Diane Holloway's dining room, I looked directly at her while everyone waited for me to apologize. Instead, I said quietly, "The only reason you still look successful is because my husband has been secretly covering your financial losses with our marital money." The silence afterwards felt violent. Ethan turned slowly toward his wife. What the hell is she talking about? Chapter 4. Ethan looked at Vanessa like he had stopped recognizing her in real time. What the hell is she talking about? Vanessa opened her mouth immediately. Too fast, too smooth. Nothing. Claire is overreacting because she wants attention. But her voice cracked slightly on the word attention, and for the first time all night, I saw fear underneath the polish. Not anger, fear. The dining room had gone completely still around us. Nobody touched their food anymore. Diane kept twisting her napkin between her fingers, while Harold stared at Nolan with a look that made him seem suddenly older. Nolan stepped toward me carefully. "Claire, stop this right now." My pulse was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, but something strange had happened once the truth finally came out. I was not scared anymore. For years, I had walked into that house terrified of becoming the difficult one, terrified of making people uncomfortable, terrified of saying the quiet part out loud. Now everybody else looked uncomfortable instead. I tightened my grip on my phone because my fingers had started going numb. No. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh that sounded almost desperate. "Oh my God, are you seriously trying to destroy this family over money?" I looked directly at her. "No, I am exposing what you did with it." The room reacted instantly to the word exposing. People shifted in their seats. Trevor leaned back like he physically wanted distance from the conversation. Ava stared down at the tablecloth instead of looking at Vanessa. Even Diane slowly removed her hand from Vanessa's arm. The protection around her was starting to crack. Ethan looked between all of us. What money? I unlocked my phone and opened the folder I had spent months building quietly in the dark while Nolan slept beside me every night, pretending nothing was wrong. Transaction histories, transfer logs, account screenshots, approval records. Nolan saw the screen and went pale immediately. "Put the phone away," he said quietly. Not angry anymore. Scared. I almost could not believe how quickly the power dynamic in the room had changed. 10 minutes earlier, I was the embarrassing wife ruining dinner. Now everyone was staring at Nolan like they were waiting for him to explain himself. I looked at Ethan. Over 14 months, money was repeatedly transferred from our joint marital accounts into Mercer Strategic Consulting. Vanessa folded her arms instantly. They were loans. I held her gaze. Then why were they hidden? She blinked hard. Nobody spoke. Outside the patio doors, wind moved through the trees around the backyard pool. The sound felt strangely loud inside all that silence. Harold finally spoke. "Nolan." Just his name, but the disappointment in his voice landed harder than shouting. Nolan rubbed both hands over his face. "It is not what it looks like." Ethan laughed once under his breath. "That usually means it is exactly what it looks like." Vanessa shot him a furious look. "Do not do this right now." He stared at her. "Then tell me the truth." She looked away first. That was the moment Ethan knew. I watched it happen in his face. Every expensive trip, every luxury purchase, every fake, effortless social media post suddenly rearranged itself into something uglier. He sat down slowly, like his legs no longer trusted him. Diane shook her head over and over. No, no, there has to be an explanation. There it was, the family reflex. Protect the illusion first. I looked at her gently. Diane, the transfers came from accounts connected to both my name and Nolan's. I found electronic approvals attached to transactions I never knowingly authorized. Harold's entire expression changed at the word authorized. He'd spent 30 years running construction contracts across Northern California. Legal exposure got his attention faster than emotion ever would. He turned sharply toward Nolan. Tell me she is wrong. Nolan didn't answer fast enough. That silence did more damage than any document I could have shown them. Vanessa suddenly snapped. This is insane. Families help each other financially all the time. I nodded once. Not secretly. She stood up so abruptly her chair scraped loudly across the hardwood. You have always hated me. For years, that accusation would have shattered me. I would have cried, apologized, tried explaining myself. But standing there in that dining room, watching everybody finally see what I'd lived with for nearly a decade, I just felt tired. No, I said quietly. I hated what this family turned me into. Nobody interrupted me, not even Nolan. I looked directly at him. Every single time she humiliated me, you told me to keep the peace. His jaw tightened immediately. Claire, but I kept going because once I started speaking honestly, I realized how exhausted I was from swallowing the truth. You told me I was overreacting. You told me not to make things awkward. You told me everybody was tired of drama. I could hear my own breathing now, fast, uneven, adrenaline moving through my body so hard that my hands wouldn't stop trembling. But peace was never the goal. You just wanted silence. The words landed across the table like broken glass. Nobody defended him. Not Harold, not Diane, not even Vanessa, because every person sitting there knew exactly how many times they watched me absorb humiliation quietly just to keep dinner comfortable for everyone else. Nolan looked at me like he wanted to regain control of the conversation, but it was gone now, completely gone. The family system they built depended on one thing: me staying quiet. And the second I stopped doing that, the entire illusion started collapsing in front of them. Vanessa looked around the table searching for support, but people wouldn't even meet her eyes anymore. Ava looked embarrassed. Trevor looked angry. Ethan looked completely destroyed. Harold looked at Nolan like he had failed some test nobody ever expected him to fail. Diane started crying softly into her napkin. I suddenly realized this was the first time since marrying into the Holloway family that I wasn't the person carrying everyone else's discomfort for them. I reached for my coat hanging behind my chair. Nolan's voice dropped lower. If you walk out that door right now, you're destroying this family. I slid my arms into the coat slowly. Then I looked around the room one last time. No, I said quietly. I just stopped protecting it. And nobody tried to stop me when I walked out. The air outside felt colder than it should have as I walked across the Holloway's driveway toward my car. Behind me, nobody followed. No one called my name. After years of being told not to make things uncomfortable, the silence behind me felt almost unreal. I sat inside my car with both hands gripping the steering wheel while my pulse slowly settled. Through the dining room windows, I could still see movement inside the house, shapes crossing the room, shadows shifting behind glass. The family was probably still arguing around that long white table while half-eaten food went cold. For years, I thought keeping peace meant protecting relationships. That night, I finally understood it really meant protecting lies. My phone started vibrating before I even backed out of the driveway. Nolan, then Vanessa, then Nolan again. I muted the phone and drove aimlessly through Granite Bay until I found a small hotel near the freeway with faded beige walls and flickering lights outside the lobby entrance. Inside the room, everything smelled faintly like detergent and old carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, while my phone continued vibrating across the nightstand. At some point, Nolan left a voicemail. I did not listen to it immediately because I already knew what it would sound like. Not guilt, not accountability,
Damage control. That was always Nolan's real instinct. The next morning, I stood beside the tiny hotel coffee maker, watching weak coffee drip into a paper cup while sunlight pushed through the curtains. For the first time in years, I noticed I could breathe fully without feeling tension in my chest. That realization almost made me cry harder than the dinner itself. I called Melissa Grant before noon. A woman at my office had given me her name 2 years earlier after her own divorce involving hidden debt and financial deception. At the time, I tucked the business card into my desk drawer, thinking I would never need it. Now, I sat in a hotel chair explaining my marriage to a stranger while cars rushed past outside the freeway. Melissa listened quietly while I walked her through everything: the transfers, Mercer Strategic Consulting, the hidden approvals, the refinance paperwork, Nolan demanding I apologize to Vanessa in front of his entire family. When I finished, she stayed silent for a moment. Then she said, "Claire, you did not destroy this family. You exposed what was already broken." Something inside me loosened hearing that, not because she magically fixed anything, but because she did not immediately ask me to minimize my own pain for someone else's comfort. Over the next several months, my marriage dissolved through conference calls, mediation meetings, document requests, and financial reviews. Real endings rarely look dramatic. They look like paperwork spread across kitchen tables. Melissa requested transaction histories, tax records, banking activity, approval logs, and communication tied to Mercer Strategic Consulting. The more documentation surfaced, the quieter Nolan became. Vanessa hired an attorney almost immediately and started telling relatives I had become unstable and vindictive. A few Holloways believed her, a few did not. Diane called me crying one night, saying families should protect each other. I remember staring out the hotel window while she spoke, watching headlights move through the darkness below. Finally, I said softly, "I spent 8 years protecting your family." She had no response to that. Ethan moved out less than 3 weeks after the dinner. He cooperated with the financial investigation quietly and without drama. One afternoon, he sent me a short text. I should have paid attention sooner. That was it. No speech, no attempt to make himself the victim. Oddly enough, it was probably the most honest thing anyone connected to that family ever said to me. Nolan kept trying to frame everything as embarrassment instead of betrayal. "We can settle this privately," he told me during one mediation call. "There is no reason to drag this out." I stood in my temporary apartment kitchen, holding paperwork against the counter. "You are worried about reputation, not what you did." His silence answered for him. By the final mediation session, Nolan looked exhausted, older somehow, like the pressure of maintaining the image everyone believed in had finally started crushing him underneath it. Harold barely spoke to him anymore. Vanessa stopped showing up to family gatherings entirely. The transfers had been reviewed, the marital accounts had been examined, questions surrounding the electronic approvals became serious enough that Nolan's attorneys stopped using words like misunderstanding and started using phrases like exposure and liability. In the courthouse hallway after signing the final settlement, Nolan caught up with me near the elevators. For a second, he looked like the man I married years earlier, calm, controlled, reasonable. Then he spoke. "You could have just apologized." I stared at him. Even after everything, he still believed the real problem started the moment I stopped absorbing humiliation quietly. "And you could have protected me." The elevator doors opened behind us. He never answered. 6 months later, I moved into a small apartment in Midtown Sacramento, with morning sunlight pouring through the kitchen windows and enough quiet to hear myself think again. No giant dining room, no forced family dinners, no rehearsing conversations in my head before speaking. Sometimes I still caught myself apologizing automatically for small things, bumping into someone at the grocery store, asking questions in meetings, taking up space. But slowly, that habit started disappearing too. I kept working in compliance and eventually began mentoring younger women entering financial ethics and risk management. Some of them reminded me of the person I used to be: smart, careful, constantly second-guessing themselves because someone taught them their instincts were inconvenient. I always told them the same thing. Pay attention to patterns, especially the ones people keep asking you to ignore. Near the end of that year, Nolan sent one final text. Things did not have to end this way. I looked at the message while morning light filled my apartment kitchen and coffee brewed quietly behind me. Then I deleted it, because the truth was, things ended long before the divorce papers. They ended the moment I realized love should not require silence to survive. If you've ever apologized just to keep peace for people who never protected yours, what finally made you stop?